At the youngish adult gathering on Wednesday evening at the lake, we were getting to know each other because we've had some new folks coming to the group, and so we were hearing about where people are living and what their roommate situations are like. And so one of the people that was there and sharing identified as an extrovert, and so she was talking about how she loves having roommates, and all of her roommates were away, and how silent it was in her apartment, and how disturbing she found that. And so she was trying to find friends to come over so that she wouldn't feel the silence quite so deeply. It made me think about some of the differences between introverts and extroverts, and then many of us who fall somewhere along that spectrum or at different times identify as one or the other. The basic knowledge we have about these different ways of being is that extroverts get energy from being around people, and introverts can be drained of energy by being around people. And then they often need time to recover, which is not to say that introverts don't enjoy people. They do enjoy people. It's really all about the different kind of energy source and how it is that we get energy. If you've been paying attention to what's gone on during the pandemic, you might have noticed that introverts and extroverts have had different responses at different phases in the pandemic. So when the lockdown first happened, I was paying attention to this collective gasp by all of the extroverts who were so worried about not being able to be out and seeing all the people, and all of the introverts who could not believe their luck in terms of being able to work from home and be at home and not have to go out and be around all the people. So there are some differences there. Sometimes extroverts can find silence really draining. And when we think about the things that give us energy or the things that drain us, it's good to think about them when we're talking about meditation. Meditation is not something that most of us are naturally good at, no matter how we identify on either ends or somewhere in the middle. Instead, meditation is a learned practice, and it's something that can become one of our most important spiritual disciplines, regardless of where our energy source comes from related to people. I would say for most of my life, I have identified as an extrovert. I love being around people, which is probably a good thing given the job I'm in, and usually I get energy from people and from working with groups. Almost 25 years ago, after being a part of group spiritual direction for 2 years, I was invited to do a 5-day vision fast in the wilderness. This was a process that was based in some indigenous traditions and rituals, and then adapted for Christian spiritual seekers. After spending 2 months preparing with my spiritual director, I was ready for my 5-day wilderness experience. As I was nearing the day, people who knew me and knew what I was getting ready to do asked me what I was most afraid of. Such a great question. I was certainly afraid of being attacked by a mountain lion. I was doing this in California, or a bear. And I was definitely afraid of the dark, which I knew would be tough because I was not sleeping in a tent. I was sleeping out in the open air. But I think my response to most people was that my real fear was the fear of being alone for 5 days. 5 days is a long time not to talk to anyone. In some ways, you might even say it's an extrovert's nightmare. The end of the story is that I survived. I didn't get eaten by anything. And the silence was a facilitator of some extraordinary depth of spiritual connection and listening. It was within a few months of this experience that I came out as queer. Silence is difficult to come by in our culture, and just because we experience silence doesn't mean we are actually seeking wisdom or that we're even ready for wisdom. The reason meditation is called a spiritual practice is that we learn by doing it over and over again, sometimes failing repeatedly along the way. Last week, we focused on the step that was about being mindful in our breathing, because focusing on our breathing is often a way into meditation. In Dr. Ed Bastian's book on inner spiritual meditation, he describes meditation like this. Meditation speaks to the capacity of human consciousness to become disciplined, focused, tranquil, one-pointed, compassionate, and wise. It can guide and calm us in times of stress, sickness, pain, and even death. Thus, it has sometimes been likened to a sturdy boat that transports our consciousness through the rough seas of life to the other shore of enlightenment or wisdom and happiness. He then says it can be helpful to understand the function of meditation, and he offers two functions that are based on classical Buddhist definitions. One function is shamatha, or calm abiding. This emphasizes the function of mental stability, tranquility, that one-pointed focus, and mindfulness. So our step 5 last week and our spiritual practice of mindful breathing falls into this function. We were practicing shamatha. Another function of meditation is vipassana, or insight. This emphasizes the function of insight, analysis, and wisdom. Our 6th step today, may we be wise in meditation, falls into this function. Meditations that fall into shamatha, or calm abiding, try to bring our minds to a tranquil or calm focus where we're not distracted. These meditations often use breathing or visualization, movement, or even chanting techniques. The hope and purpose of these meditations is that we would become focused and absorbed on and in a particular object. In the Christian tradition, that object could be a verse, it could be Jesus, it could be another symbol or icon that has meaning for us. It could also be something in nature that speaks of creation to us, or some other symbol that draws us to God. When we're focused and absorbed, that can lead to a transcendent experience of peace, tranquility, and connection with God that is more expansive and in which we can hear or see things we might not commonly hear or see, which is another way of saying receiving insight. Meditations that fall into vipassana or insight tend to build on the calm, abiding meditations and then take us deeper into processes that help generate a specific wisdom or insight about the object of our meditation. In our Christian tradition, this wisdom can be anything from insight about the nature of God or Jesus or Spirit or all three, or how we're being called in our lives in terms of vocation or volunteering. Over time, there are people who engage in this type of meditation who are able to move from a more analytical mind experience to a real intuitive experience. This kind of wisdom and insight is what our step 6 is about for today. Moving from step 5, which is being mindful of our breathing and experiencing calm in our minds, bodies, and spirits, to a deeper level of meditation, which then leads us to insight and wisdom and clarity. Well, as you might have guessed, meditation is not one of my stronger gifts. My mind is a difficult one to quiet. I'm sure some of you can relate. Given the right circumstances, I can do it, usually without falling asleep, but not always. I have been known to fall soundly asleep during meditations. And I've had times where zero insight has happened, and I've had other times of profound insight. One experience I had was many years ago in the form of a visualized prayer to be used for meditation leading to wisdom. A woman I knew told me about this, and she described it, and as she described it, I knew I also wanted to be able to do it. She described a visual experience and conversation with Jesus where you imagine that you are taking Jesus into your heart, and then you walk with Jesus around your heart, and you have conversation with Jesus about your heart. Now, like with many meditations, you really have to use your imagination for this one. And she shared with me the conversation she ended up having with Jesus once they were together in her heart. And it sounded like a difficult conversation. So I committed to doing this, and I was a young parent at the time, which meant I had to get up very early in order to get up before my kids woke up, so that I would have the silence and the space to do it. So for 1 month, 30 days, every morning, I got up early and I sat in silence and I did the practice. And every morning for a month, I heard nothing other than my own breathing. It was a bummer. I grew impatient. I didn't understand why I wasn't hearing or seeing anything. We didn't even get into my heart. It felt like Jesus never even came to me. So at the end of the month, I gave up. That was it. I was done. It wasn't working for me. And then a few weeks later, I went on a ski trip with my youth group, and I was riding a chairlift up the mountain. And as I rode it, Jesus came to me as clear as day and spoke with me about my heart. And that experience continues to impact me today. I wanted to share it with you because I think it's important for us to know that if we're open to insight and wisdom, it could come at any time, in any place, and in any way, and not always the time, place, or way you think it's going to come. And it certainly will not always come during your times of meditation. Part of developing a discipline of meditation means that we're slowly transforming the ways that we are in the world and the ways we pay attention. If I hadn't done that month, I am not sure I would have been open to the experience that I had on the chairlift. It was a preparation of sorts. The stories we read about Jesus as a boy in the Gospel of Luke are some of the only glimpses we have of him in his younger years. We're told that his parents took him to Nazareth to live, and that he grew up, which in this particular story means to the ripe old age of 12, and was full of wisdom, and God's favor was on him. It's a bit unusual to say that 12-year-olds are full of wisdom when we know that their frontal lobes haven't even connected yet. But Jesus was full of wisdom. There aren't many details about 0 to 30 for Jesus. And not only is this one detail given, but it's also repeated. It's not said just once. Jesus was wise. At the end of the story about Jesus' parents accidentally leaving him in Jerusalem and then being worried sick and having to go back a day, we're told as a kind of conclusion to the story that Jesus matured in wisdom and years, and that Jesus grew in favor with God and people. And that's what we know of his life from 0 to 30. So again, the fact that wisdom was attributed to Jesus seems important. And if it's that important for Jesus, surely it's that important for us. And if Jesus could be full of wisdom at age 12, then we too can be full of wisdom at any age. And we all have room to grow in our wisdom. Now, a parallel spiritual discipline, but one that is different from meditation, is contemplation. How many of you have heard the word contemplation before? It's become pretty popular, I would say. It sort of goes in and out of vogue over the centuries, but we've heard so much about it in the past decade, and one of the reasons for that is that Father Richard Rohr created the Center for Action and Contemplation in New Mexico. And because of that, he's opened a whole new generation of people to the concept of contemplation, and he's pairing it with action. There's also a lot happening with young people in the area of contemplation because it's a way to bring community and spiritual discipline together. Contemplation, according to Dr. Ed Bastian, is often associated with thinking about or considering something deeply. We all contemplate things. We contemplate a decision we have to make. We might contemplate something that we're reading. We contemplate a prayer that comes from someone. We contemplate songs that we hear in different areas. Meditation, on the other hand, has come to mean specific techniques for calming and focusing the mind to achieve a specific state of mental, emotional, and spiritual being. They're similar in that both create a state of mind that is not distracted by external thoughts or emotions or by sensory stimuli. They're different in terms of what outcomes are hoped for. With contemplation, there's something specific we're considering, and often we're seeking resolution in the form of clarity or a decision or deeper understanding. With meditation, the primary outcome is a calm and focused mind and body, which can then open the way to insight and analysis and wisdom. With only one more step to go in our 7-week series, hopefully the process of inner spiritual meditation is becoming more clear. Steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 are invitation to and forms of contemplation. Steps 5 and 6, so last week and this week, are invitation to and forms of meditation. And next week, step 7, is all about what we do with it and how we take it into the world. Now, you don't have to remember all of that, but as we see the video, which we're going to see in a little bit, it's interesting for you to think about invitations to contemplation and meditation. In a few minutes, I'm going to lead us in a meditation practice for step 6, May we be wise in meditation. During this practice, we're going to say something out loud over and over, which many of us aren't used to doing in any context, let alone a communal one. So Chungers has agreed to play some soft piano music to help dissipate the sound so that we won't be quite as self-conscious. So you're going to need to be thinking about a sacred word or a phrase or a sound that you want to focus on. It could be, you could say the word God or Jesus or Spirit. It could be the word peace or compassion or love or light or any combination of those. It could be a verse or part of a song that you're just going to say over and over again. It can also literally just be the sound of a hum, if that's a sound that brings you calm and tranquility. The idea is to hear and feel the vibrations of the sound so deeply that eventually you're kind of emptied of yourself and full of the sound. Now, some of you have mentioned to me after these practices that it's a little hard not to fall asleep. So I do want to give you some tricks, since I'm also someone who can fall asleep in meditation, and I've used these tricks many, many times. One trick is to keep your eyes open and just focus, instead of like letting your eyes wander all around the room, pick a spot somewhere in front of you that you can just focus on. With your eyes open, it's a little harder to fall asleep. Another trick is if you have a ring on a finger or a bracelet, you can just turn the ring, turn the bracelet. You don't even have to think about it. It's just something that, again, will keep you awake. The other thing is you can just take a finger or a hand and just tap your leg like this. And again, you don't have to think about doing it, but it's another way that you can keep attention so that you're not fully asleep. And if you do fall asleep, be gentle with yourself. That must be what you need today. Being wise in meditation is not just for our own sake, not just so we can describe ourselves or be described as wise. It's really for the sake of every encounter and every interaction we have in our lives. Jesus' wisdom was never a private wisdom, but was always a public wisdom. Our world needs more people who are wise like Jesus. Amen.